Welcome in. Latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. Go by SEC Mike on the Twitters. I just realized, Stephen, I should probably update that intro for when you're on it. It's Cousin Shane's face. I didn't want to fool people, but simply looking at the screen, you know that is Steven Lassan, senior editor over at Athlon Sports. Stephen, how are you, my friend?
Mike, I'm doing good. To be honest with you, Shane's a better draw than I am, so maybe we can get some more people streaming in here to watch tonight's show. So shout out to Cousin Shane. Hope he's doing well to start this week. But Mike, 2 SEC teams in the Final Four, spring practice going on. We got the draft coming up, so it's not too bad in the sports world, right?
It never is, Stephen. It never is, and football is never far from our mind. So what we're going to do on this episode, Stephen and I, we always get together before and kind of discuss. I mean, Stephen's got a dang encyclopedia of topics he wants to hit on, but this one was actually my idea for this week. And the theme is breakout players, players on the rise, however you want to break that down. And I really wanted to kind of focus on players that I assume the diehard fans will know these players on their team, but the rest of the SEC fan bases probably don't have a firm understanding of who these players are. But by the end of the season, I think everybody in the SEC will know the vast majority of the names that we're about to tackle. Does that make sense, Stephen?
It does, Mike. This was hard too. I mean, I always struggle with the definition of like on the rise breakout player, because I think you and I, we watch all these teams, we're digesting all 16 team rosters, and it's like, is that guy a breakout? Is he really? And you're trying to gauge like what each fan base is knowing about other teams. So I'm excited to see your picks, because I think we're going to have some differences here, and I'm afraid I may have went a little too deep on some of these, but hey, make for good discussion.
Yeah, I hate to even admit this, Stephen, but I mean, this is just the reality of college football. We don't have to go down this rabbit hole too far, but I mean, when we do exercises like this, I have to break out my cheat sheet and make sure, are these guys still on the team?
Yeah.
I mean, who the heck knows? I mean, 1 week they're on the team, 1 week they're not. Doesn't matter if the portal's open, portal's closed, guys are jumping in it. So I didn't pick anybody that I don't believe is not on their current team, but never can tell in 2025, can you?
Check back in about 15, 16 days, because the portal opens up again. So we may have to do this again, as half of these players won't be playing in the SEC. So man, it is interesting to look at some of these teams, and you start seeing like 7 returning starters, 8 returning starters, and that data doesn't necessarily mean anything for a season, but it does tell you like experience. And you're trying to figure out, okay, they've lost like 10 of their top 15 tacklers, they've lost all their leading receivers. Who the heck is going to be that type of player? So the portal NIL era has made it a lot tougher to sort of know who's back here in early April, late March.
Right. And you already know, Stephen, the breakout cousin on this channel, Cousin JR. He just showed up again, Stephen, and gifted 5 memberships. This time, Todd Gwynn, JPS, Big Money, Barrett Taylor, and Michael Raleigh. You've all been gifted memberships thanks to the legend that is Cousin JR. Welcome to the family, cousins. Thank you, JR. At some point, we've got to let it be known, Stephen, that this show is sponsored by JR.
He not only is he a breakout player, I was thinking he'd be like first team All SEC, first team All America, Hall of Famer, SEC legend, like 4-time Heisman winner.
Yeah, we got to get if there was shout outs in the Athlon magazine, hell, we might want to put him in the Athlon magazine too. Yeah. You know what?
I'm gonna write that down and research. Give JR a shout out, because he's such a loyal listener, membership giver. I'm out of adjectives to describe how awesome he is. I hope he's not contemplating a trip to the transfer portal anytime soon. Like I said, it opens up soon, so maybe we need to sweeten that NIL deal a little bit.
Yeah, Liquid says we got to rename the Heisman to the JR Trophy. I fully support that message.
Same here. Count me in for it. JR's legend.
Well, hey, Stephen, before we get into the breakout players, there is 2 things I wanted to hit you with real quick. First of all, what would be the opposite of a JR? Would be a JP, as in Jeremy Pruitt, suing the NCAA for $100 million. This was announced late last week. We haven't really touched on it, but what was your thoughts when you heard, anybody that missed it? Yeah, I'm not stuttering here. $100 million. Jeremy Pruitt is suing the NCAA for, and in some sense, he's got a case because he is, to my knowledge, the last coach to literally be fired for paying the players, which is now, of course, totally illegal, but was not legal at the time. And it's just hard for me to gather, Stephen, that he, even if he wasn't fired, he'd come anywhere close to earning $100 million in any career choice he made. But and now I think he's a PE coach down in Alabama.
Yeah, $100 million as a defensive coordinator for somebody seems like a really long stretch, doesn't it? Unless you're expecting this explosion of coaching salaries over the next couple of years. My first thought when I read that headline was, is that right? Like 100 million? And then you read the kind of the details of it. It's alleging a pretty significant conspiracy between the NCAA and Tennessee. And let's be honest, I mean, the NCAA can barely get rules right. It can barely legislate these NCAA investigations in a very timely manner. So I don't know, man. A conspiracy, they don't seem like the right association to execute some sort of massive conspiracy against Jeremy Pruitt, and somehow he's the fall guy. That seems a little bit ambitious to me.
Yeah, and even again, even if he didn't have any of those firings for cause and all that, I mean, I don't think the guy was ever going to be a head coach again. Certainly not in the SEC. I think he certainly would have been a defensive coordinator. But yeah, I mean, come on, $100 million. That's ridiculous.
It seems like to me there's maybe a part of this that he's trying to clear his name a little bit, and maybe to work back into that defensive coordinator role. Maybe you're trying to fight for some sort of settlement, perhaps from the NCAA, to get some of that money back. I think it's pretty telling, though, once you read through some of the stories and you remember, oh yeah, they did his lawyer kind of would put that deadline on Tennessee to respond to that lawsuit, and Tennessee basically didn't answer them. So I think that says a lot. They tried to call a bluff, and Tennessee just didn't answer, which says a lot, I think, about where this is going.
Yeah. Hey, what other things, Steve, before we get into the breakout players? Cousin Shane and I we went on a deep dive over an hour long on last episode. Go check it out if you want to get into the deep dive on this. But 2025 SEC win totals via FanDuel, Stephen. I'm going to run down these real quick. All 16. This, to my knowledge, is the first that we have all 16 SEC over-under win totals for 2025. And we got 4 teams at the top, Stephen. Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, and Alabama. All 4 of those, 9.5 over-under win total. Again, for Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, and Bama. We got LSU and Ole Miss at 8.5 each. And then here again, we got 4 teams at 7.5 over-under win total. Auburn, Texas A&M, South Carolina, Missouri, and oh crap, Hugh Freeze finally found me, Stephen. I don't know if you can hear my dog back here, but we got 6.5. We got Oklahoma and Florida, but each of those 6.5, 5.5 for Arkansas, 4.5 for Kentucky and Vanderbilt, and last and I guess least here, Mississippi State 3.5. These are the over/under win totals from FanDuel. So I want to ask you, Stephen, the same thing I asked Cousin Shane on the last episode. Which one of these, as of today, as of March 31st, are you most confident goes over in 2025?
Mike, I see a couple candidates that I like, but I'm going to take Florida here. I know the schedule is hard. I'm going to bank on this team continuing the progression that we saw at the end of last season. Those wins over Ole Miss, LSU, Florida State, Tulane, carrying a lot of weight for me in this discussion. And also, I sort of believe just that DJ Lagway is just going to be a lot better in his first full year as the starter. So yeah, difficult schedule, but I think Florida finds a way to get to at least 7 despite a very difficult schedule. Also, continue to be stunned at Missouri at 7.5. That feels very low to me, just because of how favorable their schedule is. I understand with a first-year quarterback, some of the other losses they have, there's probably going to be some skepticism. But I mean, this Missouri schedule is very, very favorable, and seems like if you're looking for a play this early in the offseason, that should rank very high on the favorable list.
Right. I mean, if they go 7-5, it feels like it would be an implosion. Again, given what 21 wins the last 2 years, is that fair to say? I mean, given the schedule, I mean, it's not easy to win 8 games in this conference, Stephen. But man, 7-5. Let's run it down here, because people say we're too on this show too friendly to Missouri. So let's say they do go 7-5. I mean, realistically, who are the 5 they're losing to? And I'll let you answer, because again, I guess I don't have it in my heart to say Missouri's got 5 losses according to the all the non-Missouri people out there.
I could probably talk my way into that. I mean, I think if you start by looking at their September schedule, I think South Carolina is the most obvious candidate that they could lose to. I do think Kansas is dangerous because of the quarterback they have, and Jalen Daniels, probably one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12. That assumes he rebounds after kind of an up and down year, but they're dangerous. And then you get to October, Alabama coming in, Auburn, Vanderbilt, both, I think, fair to say, they're gettable in those games. And then A&M, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. So I know I kind of mentioned most of their schedule, but I guess what I'm getting at is I would take the over on that side of 7.5. But I can also talk myself into, when I see those road games kind of blocked out late October, November, yeah, they got some toss-ups on the road, and then you're welcoming in Alabama and South Carolina and Texas A&M. 3 of your tougher games come at home, but you also get some swing games on the road as well. So I guess I could talk myself into understanding why some people will be looking at the under in that equation.
Ooh, not me. All right. So so you went with Florida and Missouri. Most confident go over. Same question. Who are you most confident goes under among these initial 2025 SEC win totals?
I think I'm leaning Kentucky at 4.5. I hate to
under 4.5.
I hate to pick on Kentucky here, Mike, but I'm having a hard time finding an SEC win for them. Certainly they beat Ole Miss last year. They get them in Lexington this year. If those big time acquisitions from the portal pay off, perhaps they could get an Auburn, they could get a Vanderbilt. But even in the non-conference schedule, Louisville probably going to be a top 30 team. I think Toledo in the first week of the season could be dangerous, especially if Kentucky does not have all the new pieces figured out. So for a Kentucky team that was a 1/4 down completion away from a winless record in SEC play last year, 5 wins seems a little optimistic for me right now.
You and cousin Shane hate Mark Stoops. What did he ever do to you guys? Come on.
Are you liking the over at 4.5 right now?
No. Well, I mean, it's just hard for me to believe they'll be that bad. But again, I mean, I can see it. I could certainly, I certainly would say for Stoops' I mean, 5-7, I don't think those fans are going to be very pleased with that. So, man, because Shane said the same thing. So, yeah, if they go 4-8, 3-9, something like that, it's hard to see him coming back. You know what?
It is, especially when a lot of those transfer additions are juniors and seniors. So you're probably looking at, hey, if this doesn't work, you're doing it again next year, and you're going back into the portal for a lot of juniors and seniors. And I would assume that there probably would be some staff changes at that point as well. So if it's a major staff overhaul, you're looking at a complete coaching overhaul as well. The other one that did come to mind, and it's kind of a team that you and I have talked a lot about as we get into the percentage of returning production, and that's Ole Miss. I mean, I think this Ole Miss team will be fine, but LSU at Georgia, at Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Florida, and I would suspect that Mississippi State will be pretty feisty at the end of the year. I could see an 8-4 here for Lane Kiffin. Am I crazy?
No, not at all. And I've heard Ole Miss defined like this, Stephen. Let me know if you agree. Not to say they're, and it is kind of exactly what you said, but just phrased a little bit differently. Not that this is not a talented team, because it certainly is, but it's just a team lacking experience, at least in an Ole Miss uniform.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. I mean, their portal class is really solid and they have help coming in pretty much everywhere. So I think in time, given the track record of Lane Kiffin and given the pieces they are bringing in, it's going to gel at some point during the season. And of course, Austin Simmons is very, very, very talented. I think he will be a very, very high on my breakout list of quarterbacks for this season. But there's a lot of high end pieces departing this team. I mean, Walter Nolan, Chris Paul, Trey Amos, and you look at the guys on offense, Trey Harris. Certainly, there's a lot of guys leaving at running back and Jackson Dart. There's a lot of high-end juniors and seniors leaving this team. I don't know that the portal class, while it's solid, brought in the same kind of caliber as they saw before the 2024 season with Walter Nolan. It feels like a step back in terms of talent from that. But that experience helps out a team that is losing a ton of it from last year.
Mm-hmm. All right, then the last thing, Stephen, which one of these, and it could be any. I love how you double up. You're like Shane. You just pick all of them. Which one, as of today? Again, there's a lot to be determined. Still a. Hopefully, we get at least a spring game. To my knowledge, there's a couple people that are not so cowardly they can't hold a spring game, and we got a portal and all that. But which team or teams is just simply too hard to call right now based on these 2025 over-under win totals?
I think the two teams that I'm having the most trouble with, Auburn and Oklahoma. Oklahoma, difficult schedule this year, but also I like Brent Venables taking over the play calling duties on defense. I also think John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle, the offense sort of bottomed out last year. It has to be better this year. So it's almost guessing how much Oklahoma improves offensively is one of my big kind of offseason debates is in trying to figure out where to rank Oklahoma. And then for Auburn, so much up and down the last 2 years, but you also look at some of the yards per play metrics. They really kind of, shot themselves in the foot a lot last year. And if they can erase some of those mistakes, you could easily see how a close game or two flips and all of a sudden they could be 8-4. They've got good talent. Jackson Arnold, in theory, should be a nice addition at quarterback. So I'm having the most difficult time figuring out Auburn and Oklahoma as we go into spring practice here.
Yeah. I think you may have nailed it with those two. I gotta be honest with you.
Texas at 9.5 seems probably a little low for me. I think even if you think they lose to Ohio State and Georgia, I'm not really seeing another loss on that schedule.
Do you think, is it fair to say, and I know we can't really do this because we need a Power 5, or Power 4, whatever we want to call it now. What if Ohio, instead of Ohio State, what if it was Purdue?
Yeah.
I think that over-under is probably 10.5. Is that fair to say?
I would agree with that. I think that over-under at 9.5 is weighing heavily on that Ohio State game. And then, of course, Georgia later in the year. You guys, I think we're talking about the Texas playoff hopes last year. If they go last night, right? 9-3.
Right.
If they go 9-3 and they lose to Ohio State, Georgia, and throw in Florida or Oklahoma.
We said Oklahoma.
I'm not sure they're getting in the playoff at that point, though.
Yeah.
Their schedules, the strength of schedule just isn't there. Maybe I'm crazy. I know we're like way off from making this point. But
I feel like Shade was the crazy one because again, I mean, if they don't, and I even went. Let me ask you same thing I asked him. If they go 9-3 and they lose to Oklahoma, again, lose to Ohio State may be number one again for all I know. They could be the best team. Georgia could be the second best. I mean, those would be both those on the road. Those are the two most respectable losses I think anybody could literally have next year. So I'm not sitting here saying they're awful. Texas could lose at Ohio State and at Georgia and be like the number 3 in the country. I'm fine with that. But if you lose to Oklahoma, what game are you hanging your hat on saying we deserve to get in? And Shane said at Florida, and he also said on the same show, Billy Napier's getting fired. So That can't be that good of a win if they're they're firing their coach.
I mean, I guess A&M, November 29th. I guess you would have to hope that they were 9-3 at that, or 9-2 at that point.
Right.
I guess the argument would be like, if Ohio State is 1 and Georgia is 2 in the last ranking, and Texas loses to Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is a top 15 team, that might be good enough for Texas. But you'd be talking about probably the last team in, because we saw this year. 10-2, 9-3 is the line of like where you want to be. You want to be 10-2 as opposed to 9-3. If Oklahoma is by some chance a top 10 team, then yeah, I think their odds get a lot better. But I think if they go 9-3 and Oklahoma, Florida, and Texas A&M are fringe top 25 teams, I'm not sure they're getting in. I know that's like way off, and like we're getting into like crazy territory, and somebody probably get really mad at me for saying that.
No, I love to hear it, Stephen. All right, hey, we delayed long enough. We're gonna hit on all 16 teams right here, Stephen. Breakout players, and Stephen and I also. The only thing, I haven't seen Stephen's list; he's not seen mine. We did kind of discuss though, and hopefully he didn't go too far with here. I have one quarterback, but it's like a wild card, and he asked me if he could have quarterbacks or not, and I told him I wasn't really going to have any. So, did you include any quarterbacks on your team?
Oh, I picked Arch Manning for all 16 teams. He's that great. I just picked one quarterback out of all of them.
Perfect. Hopefully we have the same one. It'll be crazy if we did, but all right. Yeah. And as always, I guess we'll just go in alphabetical, unless you want to throw us a donation of any kind, then we'll throw your team to the top of the list. It's certainly not something you have to do. So until further notice, let's just go in alphabetical, Stephen. Where are we at with Alabama? Who's your breakout candidate for the Crimson Tide?
I'm going to go with someone on defense. I'm going to go with LT Overton. Like what he did last season, first season transferring in from Texas A&M, 32 quarterback hurries. That led the team. It only translated into 3 tackles for a loss and 2 sacks. And typically when you see a high pressure rate and it's not translating, the next year it kind of does. So I think year 2 of being at Alabama, another year to learn under Kane Womack, I think there's a chance that LT Overton takes a big step forward on the stat sheet and becomes a difference maker off the edge for Alabama, or on the defensive line.
Yeah, I that is a solid selection, Stephen. When I even considered myself, I think Alabama is going to be one of the better defenses in the entire SEC. So they're going to need a leader to emerge there. And one thing that I have heard is a criticism of LT Overton is, and this is something that you can overcome. He gets to the quarterback, but he failed to bring him down. So you just bring him down more often, and his stats are going to look eye-popping. So, again, I really like that one, and I was struggling a little bit with Alabama, but and hopefully this is not cheating, Stephen, but I picked someone that was productive, but I didn't think he quite did what I thought he would do, and I think in year 2 in the SEC, I think he could blow up. Give me receiver Jeremy Bernard, because all the focus will be on Ryan Williams. We all know how old he is. We all know how fantastic he is. Not taken away from him whatsoever. He may be the best receiver in the country. But I think with that focus over there, with hopefully a more consistent passing attack, regardless of, we don't even know who the quarterback will be, I think Jeremy Bernard will have again, he had 794 yards last year, so it's not like he didn't do anything. But I think he could be more of I think by the end of the season, he could be in discussion perhaps for all SEC if Alabama's a lot better in the passing game.
I agree with that. I think there's more probably opportunities for Bernard this year. And I think it starts with, number one, I think Ryan Grubb will do a better job as offensive coordinator. Whoever the quarterback is, I think there may be some more consistency there, especially maybe like over the middle of the field and some of the other passing concepts. Also, I think just in general, Alabama's receiving core, they brought in Isaiah Horton from the transfer portal in Miami, and they also get Jalen Hale, who was injured all of last season. So all of a sudden, I kind of felt at times like last year that it was like Ryan Williams and Bernard. It was kind of a two-man show at receiver. Feels like they got a little bit more depth this year. And so I suspect that Bernard will benefit from maybe they move Ryan Williams around with the staff changes, quarterback. I think that's a great call, Mike.
Mm-hmm. Well, a great call from I just missed it. The Queen of the Cow. What a name! What a name! But hey, that's his name, and he gave us a little donation. So we're going to do the Gamecocks. Steven, go ahead and tell me all about Nick Harbor, boys. Did you pick Nick Harbor? Because I have a feeling you may have.
I actually did not. I did consider him though. So he was actually second on my list, and you guys may think I'm crazy. I had to get somebody from the trenches on there. We got to get some big uglies represented on this Players on the Rise. So I went with Josiah Thompson at left tackle. He was a highly regarded player coming in, kind of up and down. Started 12 games, 6 sacks allowed. I think some of the advanced metrics charted him for about 25 quarterback hurries allowed. So plenty of room to improve. But I always like when freshmen start at left tackle and you think year 2, the light switch goes on. They've had a year to spend in the weight room. So I picked Josiah Thompson largely because I wanted to get an offensive lineman on this list. And I always bank on talent plus experience translating into more production the next year.
Yeah, I like that, Steven. I like that pick a lot. And hey, shout out Cousins. Give us your picks. Cousin Jesse, he's a big Gamecock, Steven. He said Harbor will be a stud, but I think the breakout star will be middle linebacker Fred Johnson. Heat-seeking missile of pure hatred. It's exactly what you want, a linebacker. Hey, I went with the receiver and not Nick Harbor. Steven, how about that? I'm going. I liked what I saw from true freshman last year. Mazio Bennett. He came on strong early, as I recall, 337 yards, 3 touchdowns as a true freshman going into year 2 with all the focus and attention on Nick Harbor. I think Bennett may be the better all-around receiver. How about that? Because, again, this is not a knock on Nick Harbor whatsoever, but still, I mean, anyone I talk to associated with Carolina says the guy's still learning the position. So, I don't know. I think Mazio Bennett could be. I really like year 2 guys. You're going to sense a theme here. A lot of year 2 players for me. I think Bennett could shine for the Gamecocks this year.
That's a good call, and I think if anything, it's probably a good thing for South Carolina that Nick Harbor is probably the easiest choice, and we found 2 guys that we probably like just as much or more potentially on a breakout candidate. And it does, I think it's encouraging if you're South Carolina that it sounds like Harbor's more, I think, spending more time with football this offseason. So maybe you kind of get that to translate that big play potential into more consistency now that you have a full offseason to work with Lenore Sellers. So I think there's a lot to like there between he and Bennett. And I like what Bennett did as a freshman. There feels like a lot more, especially if you can continue that production from the first half to the second half. Maybe you don't hit that freshman wall in year 2. So I really encouraging, I think, for South Carolina.
Mm-hmm. All right. How about, let's go back to alphabetical for now. Steven, how about them Razorbacks?
Mike, did you have a hard time with this pick for Arkansas?
I did, but I like my selection. I'm just hoping you didn't pick them.
I'm going to go with offense. I'm going to go with running back. I'm going to go with Braylon Russell. I like running backs that are 6'1", 253 pounds. It's like Jerome Bettis reincarnated, the bus coming to Fayetteville this offseason. I like Arkansas's depth at running back, though, and I think that may limit his upside in terms of carries. But you look at his production in sort of limited time last year, 175 versus Mississippi State, 62 yards versus Tennessee, and 50 in the bowl game against Texas Tech. Pretty encouraging start, it sounds like, this offseason in workouts. So it feels like he's on track to take that number 1 running back spot, with the caveat that they've got Rodney Hill, Mike Washington, and AJ Green back to have a pretty deep backfield.
Well, you did it, Steven. You picked my guy, so shout out for you. But hey, great minds think alike. The only problem with Braylon Russell, he might be in the portal as of this recording. I mean, the guy jumps in the portal 20 times a season, but hopefully he's done with that. And again, now that hopefully that's all behind him, maybe that will help, focus, lock in. He'll be happy where he's at. Year 2, Bobby Petrino's system. We talk and talk and talk Taylon Green, as we should. I think he's got tremendous upside. But I think if Taylon Green takes that next step, it's just going to help Braylon Russell kind of clear that path, because they have to honor everything Taylon Green that comes with him, his incredible arm, his dynamic running ability. I mean, you have to center your defense on stopping Taylon Green. I think that's really going to open it up for Braylon Russell to have a career year.
Yeah, it's almost a kind of simple like math equation, because with the running quarterback, it gives you like 11 on 11 instead of like 10 on 11 when you're playing with like a statue back there. So it makes it a lot harder to defend. And then you're throwing in someone like Braylon Russell, who can really hit you with the physicality, also a little bit of speed in there as well. But just in general, I think when I think about Bobby Petrino, I think about not only it's like the explosive offenses and passing games, but always like good rushing attacks. I mean, JaQuinton Jackson had was it almost 800 yards last season, and even back, I think about like Michael Bush back at like Louisville back in the day. Big time running backs who can tote the rock 175, 200 times. That seems like that's Braylon Russell's wheelhouse. It feels like Petrino can feed him, and I mean, pretty much an entire new secondary. And so until you get these guys acclimated, you can lean on that rushing attack.
And I'm seeing a lot of Omega Blake in the comments. I think you shouted him out before, Stephen. Their transfer, who was at South Carolina. I believe he transferred down to another school. Now he's at Arkansas. Given that Arkansas dead last in the SEC in returning production at the receiver position, they're going to need some guys to step up there. And Omega Blake is someone that Coach Sam Pittman has talked up quite a bit this spring.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a big time player. And I think that, first of all, I think, he's had an interesting path like South Carolina to Charlotte. But what he did at Charlotte to me is pretty notable. And this doesn't always translate, but he averaged almost 25 yards per catch with some pretty shaky quarterback play. 32 receptions, and 9 of those went for touchdowns. So I just think if you can do that with some pretty shaky quarterback play, and now you're getting Taylon Green at Arkansas, and you're getting Bobby Petrino, and you're not getting a mess of a coaching staff at Charlotte, I think that's a great pick for Arkansas. Somebody has to catch passes, right? So why not somebody who's averaging almost 25 yards a pop at Charlotte last year?
Hey, how about this one from cousin Brian Moore? He says, bleeding the right color orange. Thought this was Tennessee at first. Nope. I can't wait to see the Hordes take over this year. Who's your pick, Stephen, for the mighty Texas Longhorns?
This might be a little bit boring, but I think it's obvious. Let's go with Ryan Wingo at receiver. I know he's a little bit banged up in spring. It sounds like he's got a hamstring injury. It might be missing some time. But just looking at what Texas loses in the receiving core with Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond also gone, the fact that Wingo was very productive in averaging about 16 yards per catch as a true freshman last year, 5-star coming out of high school, catching passes now from the world's greatest quarterback, Arch Manning. I think he's in for a massive year.
And I'm laughing over here, Steve, because that was my guy. Come on, Ryan Wingo. And like you said, unfortunate news we got just today was announced. I believe he's going to miss the rest of spring due to that hamstring, but they're going cautious down there in Texas anyway. No spring game. Hate it. I think they're the only ones that have a legitimate reason. They made it so far in the playoff. They played in the SEC championship. So I get it. I don't fault them. I don't think they're cowards. I think basically the rest of the SEC is not playing a spring game. I think you're a coward. But Ryan Wingo, elite, like you said. He flashed it at times last season. In his first year, I know he clearly wasn't the go-to. I think he could have been. He could have been, Stephen. He looked at times to be so talented. He probably could have been the number one receiver, but they had so many options they didn't need him. Now, like you said, with those guys off to the NFL, they're going to need that number one to step up. I think Ryan Wingo. I mean, I think there's a chance with the great Arch Manning, as Stephen is trying to puncture into our minds here. If he's that good, I think Ryan Wingo's could be an All-American. I think he could be that good. And I'm not saying 2 years. I'm saying immediately. I think in year 2 he could be.
I would agree with that. I think there's a chance that he's certainly among the top 5 or 6 SEC receivers this preseason, if you were to rank them just based upon potential production. If I had to throw out some other names for Texas, I was thinking about Trevor Gooseby, the tackle. He started for Kelvin Banks, especially in some high pressure spots this season. So I think you got him some experience last year. He can slide into one of the tackle spots, however it works out for Texas. I thought Colin Simmons was a little too high profile, probably to be a breakout star. But I think SEC fans know and Texas fans know how good he was. I think the rest of the country is going to find out how good Colin Simmons and throw Anthony Hill in there as well. If you didn't know how good they were, you will after 2025.
Right. And if you didn't know how good Ridge Wallet is, Stephen, it may be time to go check them out. Ridge.com/SEC. How about it, Stephen? And over at ridge.com/SEC, they give them 40% off, Stephen, because this is their anniversary special for the cousins out there. If you need a new wallet, they got you covered over at ridge.com. These are unique, slim, modern design, and hold up to 12 credit cards in a single wallet, made with premium metals like aluminum, titanium, carbon fiber, over 50 different colors to choose from. All Ridge products, Stephen, have a lifetime guarantee, and they have over 100,000 5-star reviews over at ridge.com. And I'm just now reminded, Stephen, I think I owe you a Ridge, don't I?
I think so, but I know you're a busy man, so no rush on that one, Mike. I was, speaking of Ridge wallets, Father's Day is not too far away. Ooh. I saw they had those NFL Ridge wallets up there, so just saying, if you got a father and need to get him a gift, those NFL logo ones coming up with the draft, just saying, might be a good gift for somebody.
Okay, hit. Get Steven the Steelers one. Got it. I got you, Steven. Yeah. I got you covered.
I hope my dad's not watching this tonight.
Because Mike says Shayna has 15 credit cards, Cracker Barrel, etc.
Somebody who might need a Ridge wallet after this year is going to be Arch Manning with all the NIL, all the.
Okay, that's enough with Arch. All right, how about the next? Ooh, how about I go first on this one, Steven? I'm going Auburn.
Yeah.
Because I don't want you to steal my guy here. You did it 2 in a row. But I have a feeling you're not going to steal this one. This is the only quarterback that I'm going with on the list. And it's not Jackson Arnold, Stephen. How about that? It's the true freshman, Deuce Knight, one of the top recruits in the country, was committed to Notre Dame. Ole Miss wanted him. All these schools wanted him. He went to Auburn. And this is a swing. I'm getting totally crazy here, Stephen. But what does Auburn do? We all know what they do. They drop games they shouldn't. They find ways to win games they probably shouldn't. So this is me projecting out, Stephen, that they start slow. They have to go to the. Could you just see it, Stephen? We're like after the first 8 games. Let's say they're like 4-4. They lose to Baylor, lose to Oklahoma, lose to A&M, lose to Georgia, and we're sitting here saying, "Good night. You freeze. Get the heck out of here." And then they insert the freshman, and he beats Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Mercer, and finds a way to beat Alabama. And then all of a sudden, Deuce Knight, they'll rally around the freshman, and Hugh Freeze is God's gift to coaching, because he can coach a freshman to win some big games. I mean, it's going to be crazy like that if Auburn gets to 8-4, and if they do, give me Deuce Knight as a breakout candidate. Thoughts on that crazy selection?
It's not crazy, because I think Hugh could say if we started Deuce Knight at the start of the season, we would have won 9 of our first 10 games and we'd be sitting in playoff contention, right? I mean, that's exactly an easy way to spin it.
And that's also how you prevent from getting fired from your coach. Why is Billy Napier still there? Because we got this incredible DJ Lagway. I mean, I'm sensing a theme here.
If Jackson Arnold struggles against Baylor, I would imagine the calls for Deuce Knight, even if he may not be 100% ready, start to get a little loud. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've already started to see it this spring. We've not even seen one guy make a throw in an Auburn uniform.
Yeah. This This is going to be interesting, and I like the call just because I think just history, Hugh Freeze track record. You know, I think Jackson Arnold's probably going to play well, but the sample size last season, a lot of things were out of his control. It wasn't great. So, I mean, if you're going to take a banking on a quarterback, I like that, taking another Auburn quarterback. So, I is Cam Coleman's probably too established. Like, I think people around the SEC know him. I'm not sure nationally he's well known enough. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say so.
So, I'm going to go defense. I think there's a couple guys in this Auburn defense that probably didn't get enough credit last year. I'm going to go with Caleb Harris at safety. Started the last 6 games of 2024. He was targeted about 26 times per some of the advanced metrics. Only gave up 13 catches, which is one of those going for a touchdown. I don't think the moment seemed too big as a freshman starting on that defense late in the year. I thought, only missed about, I think 4 tackles per some of those metrics. So really encouraging finish to the season. And you add in guys like Keldrick Falk, Demarcus Riddick at linebacker. There's a nice core of young defenders on that Auburn defense.
Do you think there's enough people talking about how good Auburn's defense could be this year? And I'm not saying, like the SEC's best or anything like that, but maybe the most underrated defense in the SEC this season.
I think that's a good call. I have not seen any buzz about this defense outside of maybe you and I talking about it. I mean, I think they held opponents to about 21 points a game last year, and there is some retooling needed up front. But it feels like there's like I mentioned with Caleb Harris, it feels like there's a really solid core of young players that's starting to develop. And also, just thinking back to last year, it's defense wasn't at fault for, I mean, obviously you could fault them at times for some of those, but when you give up 17 and lose to Vanderbilt and you give up 21 to Missouri, 24 to Arkansas, that's not necessarily all the defense's fault. So yeah, I would buy that.
Especially when there's so many interceptions in the air.
Right. Not great. Not getting a lot of help from the other side of the ball, right?
All right, how about the Florida Gators, Steven? Who is your breakout candidate? And this is the only one I wrote down 2, so there's no chance you steal both of mine.
I've got 2, but I'll start with one of them. We'll see if we agree. I'm gonna go, and maybe this is too obvious. Gonna go with Jaden Baugh at running back. Billy Napier, if you look at his track record at Louisiana and so far at Florida, always pretty productive players at running back. Jaden Baugh led the team in rushing last year. And also, if you want to get kind of nerdy with this stuff, he generated about 3 yards per contact, yards after contact, and forced 32 missed tackles. So opportunity for a bigger role, really solid production last year. Florida's going to have a good offensive line. I think Jaden Ball's got a chance to be one of the better running backs in the SEC next year.
Well, that was one of my, and again, I thought maybe that was a little cheating. So that's why I have 2 here. Cause like you said, he really kind of broke out at the tail end of the season, but again, I don't know that he's a household name yet in the SEC. I think he certainly will be by the end of the season. But how about this name, Stephen? This guy's made waves in the recruiting world. I think a lot of people have written him off, and by all indication, he has really dedicated himself. He's finally realizing his massive potential, and he's filling out. And I'm hearing rave reviews in the spring about defensive back Cormani McClain. And this is the guy that signed with Colorado. Dion run him off and said many things. You can just Google it. I don't want to repeat all that. But even when he got to Florida, I don't think he was a seamless transition. Very slender guy. He's put on weight. He's, like I said, he's dedicated himself. I think Cormani McClain, early on, I believe he was a 5-star. I think he finished as a 4-star. But if he's truly locked in, I think he could be kind of a missing piece for that Florida secondary.
Yeah, I think in general, I think Florida secondary's got to play a lot better this year. I like the call just because there's opportunity with guys like Jason Marshall leaving. Was it Bridges and a couple other defensive backs are gone for Florida, but there's opportunity, and there's also the talent side of this too. I mean, being that highly regarded of a player coming out of high school, I think it's very easy to bank on that turning into production this year. That also gets a kind of the second piece of the Florida puzzle I was hinting at there, which is it feels like Miles Graham, Aaron Childs, LJ McCray, three big time recruits in last year's class, didn't play a ton last year, didn't make a huge statistical impact. If they step up and McLean steps up, this Florida defense has a chance. We saw it last year. They got a lot better. They got chance to get a lot better again in 2025 if those pieces start to realize some of their potential.
All right. I apologies, Stephen. Did you say you had two for Florida? Did you say the second one?
Yeah, it was the trio, the law firm of Graham, Childs, and McCray on the.
That's four then.
That's four. It was a package deal. Young Florida defenders. Yeah.
All right. How about for Georgia? Where'd you go for the Dogs?
This one might be too obvious, but I think he's going to go from superstar, known, I should say, really solid season last year, to household name, and that's KJ Bolden at safety. You've got Malachi Starks gone, Dan Jackson's gone. The season that Bolden had last year, kind of as he wasn't a full-time starter, but he certainly played a lot of snaps. 59 tackles, 1 interception. It feels like he's just scratching the surface of his potential. And we saw Malachi Starks make that big jump. He was an impact player right away. Feels like Bolden is going to do the same thing this year.
Yeah. So Cousin Donald says, are they playing the Monopoly guy in week 2? No, that is that's Austin P. That's Steven's alma mater. How dare you, sir? Right. How dare you? No, I love that pick though. KJ Bolden, outstanding, Steven. Very rare that you start as a true freshman. So it's even more rare you do it at a place like Georgia. So he's phenomenal. I love that pick. How about this one? A little off the radar. Played a little bit last. See, they're going to need someone to step up at receiver. I know they get Young back after his trouble, so I even considered him. But I went with London Humphreys, Stephen. Year 3 in college football, year 2 in Athens, after, of course, transferring in from Vanderbilt. I feel like that's someone that's been missing since, I guess you could say Ladd McConkey. He was pretty awesome. But Georgia, they need that slide, especially the way their offense is going to be run now with Gunnar Stockton. I don't know how much of it's going to be deep vertical threats. I think it's going to be a lot of the underneath stuff. Give me London Humphreys, who he had 15 catches, 244 yards last season. I think he could triple those numbers, and given that this is year 2 for him in Athens.
I thought he would make a bigger impact last year, and especially with some of the troubles they had of drop passes. I thought he might be targeted more. Also remembered that he had mono early in the year, and that probably played a part in that too. Maybe he wasn't as returned as fast as probably he wanted to. So I like that call of London Humphreys. I think with Humphreys getting better, Colby Young coming back, Noah Thomas, and Branch transferring in, there's a pretty good group of playmakers coming in there for Georgia. And hopefully, if you're Georgia, a group that's a lot more consistent this season. So I thought you could also, from the offensive side, list Nate Frazier, because I think they got to get back to running the ball better. Also think Ellis Robinson at corner probably due to step up and play a lot more this season too.
All right, how about Kentucky, Stephen? I saw someone say, do they even have breakout players? Don't write off Kentucky like Stephen and Cousin Shane. I'm all in on Kentucky. Get us to 5 wins. Come on. Who's the breakout candidate that's going to carry us there, Stephen?
I had a really hard time with this one, so feel free to make fun of my selection here. I'm going to go with Jamori Macklin at receiver. Yes, he's the cousin of the great Jeremy Macklin, who, of course, starred at Missouri. But he only caught 13 passes last year, but he averaged 24 yards per catch. So I like the big playability. But it's not just what happened at Kentucky last year. If you go back to when he was at North Texas, much more involved in 2023, 57 receptions, also averaged almost 18 yards per catch that year. So he's got a track record of being a very dynamic downfield playmaker. They just need somebody to catch passes. I mean, you lose Barian Brown, you lose Dane Key, you lose a couple other guys that were catching the ball last year. somebody's going to catch passes, and he tends to have a track record of catching and making big plays. So give me Jamori Macklin.
Oh, okay. I thought for a second there with that J, I thought you were going to steal mine again, Steven. I'm going running back, Jamarian Wilcox. How about that? Came on late in the season. Didn't play a ton early, but he had multiple 100-yard receiving games in the final month of the season. And shout out our friend SEC Stat Cat. He's been on the show. Does a great job. Only SEC running back, Steven, with at least 50 carries that finished inside the top 2 in the SEC in yards per carry average, broken tackle rate, and explosive run. And, that's kind of got me down the rabbit hole of Wilcox, but it also got me thinking, Steven, what is the DNA of Mark Stoops? It's running the football, offensive line. And when these coaches got their backs against the wall, jobs on the line, they go back to their bread and butter. It's going to be running the ball, it's shorten the game, rely on your defense, hand it to our hammer of a running back, Wilcox, 20, 25 times. I think Wilcox, if Kentucky does anything, it's going to be because, I hate to say it, because I am a fan of Zach Calzada. I don't think it's going to be Zach Calzada throwing it all over the yard. I think it's going to be Kentucky being able to move the chains on the ground.
I thought you might pick Wilcox, so I decided to go. That's why I went with Macklin. So score one for guessing appropriately. I think you're spot on about sort of program DNA. And when you are a coach like Mark Stoops and your back is against the wall, I think you could reinvent the wheel, or you could just go back to what you know. And what you know is good defense, run the ball, lean on your offensive line. They got some experience coming in the offensive line. I think that gives them a chance. But I think if you think about like Benny Snell, Chris Rodriguez, they tend to turn, and Ray Davis churn out running back. So it feels like Wilcox might be that next 1,000-yard receiver. They brought in Dante Dowdell from Nebraska as a transfer. It feels like he's probably going to be a pretty solid second option with Wilcox leading the way.
Hey, Steven, correct me if I'm wrong here. Free says Colby Young transferred to Troy.
That is Ra Thomas that transferred.
Yeah, okay, because Colby Young was the guy. Sorry for the confusion, but
yep.
he got suspended. You can go read all that, but he's in the clear, so he's back. So I just wanted to clarify that. I thought I made a mistake. Hey, shout out Cousin Jared. He just gave us $10, Steven. He's a big LSU guy. So let's do LSU breakout player. Man, I think I got a really good one here, Steven. Who do you? I'll let you go first, though.
Mike, I talked about this guy a few weeks ago, and it's hard to figure out where he fits in because they have some pretty intriguing weapons at receiver. But I'm going to go with Chris Hilton because when he was in there late in the season, the big play was there. 9 catches for 243 yards and 3 touchdowns, 27 yards per catch. That receiver room, it's got a little bit of turnover, but they got Aaron Anderson, Nick Anderson, some other weapons. So I don't know how the starting lineup looks, but it feels like Chris Hilton's going to catch a few big plays for LSU this year.
Yeah, Cousin Jared said the LSU's about to have 9 breakout players. So, you gave me a heart palpitation there, Steven, when you said receiver. Because I'm going a different receiver. I'm going Barian Brown. Kentucky fans hate that guy now because he left. But obviously a fantastic kick returner. How about this, though, Steven? Because I was looking at the numbers. And I don't believe you define a player by numbers, right? But his numbers have gone down every single year. He came out solid as a freshman. They were down as a sophomore, and then even worse last year as a junior. But what is the common denominator between all those years, Steven? Kentucky quarterback play.
Right.
Again, and I know there's plenty of evidence. I'm not a huge Will Levis fan, but he's significantly better than any of the quarterbacks they've had the last 2 years up there in Kentucky. And I think pairing Barian Brown with a capable quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier, he may be the best quarterback in the SEC. This is a money year, even though I'm sure he's making good money. This is a true money year for Barian Brown. If he wants to play receiver in the NFL, he's got to go out here and he's got to prove it at LSU. I'm not super high on a lot of transfers to make big impacts year one. It's usually year 2. but I think Barian Brown could be the exception because he's played so long in the SEC. He's not going to be any stranger to what he's going to have to do here in Baton Rouge. Thoughts on Barian Brown being that breakout player?
Also, I think almost like good competition can breed success for him. So if you're going up against like Nick Anderson, Chris Hilton, Aaron Anderson, I mean, Nick Anderson's been at Oklahoma, Aaron Anderson's been at Alabama. This room is really talented. So if you want to get on the field, you better be like 100% dedicated and working on your craft every day and getting better, because otherwise they got the dudes that are just going to be playing more snaps. So I think that could help him. He did have, I think, 4 drops last year at Kentucky. So I think maybe that little bit of the consistency, if you can clean that up. So I in a very basic level, it feels like somebody, I hate to say this, like somebody's going to catch passes at LSU outside of Aaron Anderson, and figuring out which one is kind of tricky. But I think that's a really solid call on LSU. Is there anybody on defense that you like to maybe break out this year?
Oh, I was just going to ask you the same thing, Stevie, because there's a lot of candidates, I think, on that side of the football. I think people are going to be sick of hearing this name, but what if they finally have Harold Perkins at the right position?
I was going to say, it feels like he's made the breakout list, I think, each of the last 2 years. It feels like it's going to happen. This is the year it's going to happen. I also thought about maybe like Dominic McKinley at defensive tackle. I know not going to put up huge stats, but it also feels like maybe talent, another year in the weight room. It gets a little stronger, holds up at the point of attack. I could, somebody at corner is probably going to break out too, whether it's Pickett or Woodland or one of the other younger corners too. But I would say, at the risk of being wrong again, it feels like they do have Perkins probably situated in the right situation this year.
Mm-hmm. Stephen Up says the sad thing is some of these players may not be around after the spring portal. That is true, but also we got to remember. Of course, they changed the rules so much. Maybe this has changed, Stephen. But to my knowledge, you got to be in the portal by February 1st if you want to go from SEC to SEC.
Right.
So unless all these guys are going to the Big Ten, which they could, and they'll be dead to me if they do that. But unless they're all going to the Big Ten, most of these guys, high-level players, I don't think are going in the portal because SEC is where the money's at.
Yeah, and we heard last year going into the spring portal window that it was going to be very busy, very active with high-profile names. I don't think we got that. I think a lot of this is, once you get past the season, roster retention becomes a priority, and then you get your players signed to the right agreement, the right money level to keep them for 2025. So it'd be really surprising, I think, to see a lot of big names. Probably not. You can't rule it out in the portal era, but since you can't transfer from SEC team to SEC team, I think that makes it a little unlikely for some high-profile SEC stars to leave for another conference.
And one other thing, again, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because I think people will, their eyes glaze over when we talk about this stuff, and it does for me too. But just trying to convey the information. It's my understanding, Stephen, when all this revenue does get approved July 1st, so all the SEC schools will have around $20 million to spend on players, and it could just all go to football. I think some of these schools may say 90% 95%, this is all going to football. So the point being, Stephen, all these teams in the SEC are going to have money. Now, can Texas outbid Mississippi State? Sure, but
they are now probably.
Right. But the point being is, again, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Kentucky, they're all going to have $15, $20 million to spend on players, unless Texas is offering some guy that's not worth it $3 million to jump ship. I don't know. I feel like there's money to go around, basically, is the point I'm trying to spit out here.
And I think just based upon what we see every year, the movement works like both ways. So you see some guys who weren't starters transferring down to get on the field, but I think the inclination is always to be looking for something better. So it's like trying to get to the SEC, trying to get that big time paycheck, which is why I think if you see a big time player leaving a Big Ten or ACC or Big 12 school, is probably to try to get to one of these spots at the SEC. So, yeah, and in general, Mike, I think this will help like the Mississippi States, Arkansas retain some of those players and not have them transfer to another school if you can give them it just as equal NIL deal.
Right. Hey, before we move on, Stephen, one other thing though. I know all this portal talk's pretty stinky. We can clean that up with some Shop Mando. How about it? ShopMando.com. Promo code SEC, Stephen, over at Shop Mando. That's ShopMando.com. Promo code SEC for $5 off a starter pack, Stephen, at old Shop Mando. What is this starter pack you keep going on about? It's a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice with free shipping over at Mando.com. Promo code SEC for $5 off. At $5 off, Stephen, that's 40% off the entire product. So, I mean, we're talking one heck of a deal here. This is clinically proven to block odor all day and control it for 72 hours. And best of all, baking soda free. Steve, I said that to Shane yesterday. It blew his mind. And he went on for 5 minutes about how he didn't have baking soda to make cookies. I don't know what that's got to do with Shop Mando, but I can tell you, Shane loves Shop Mando. I can promise you that.
If it works I know Mando works really well. And if it works for like that 72 hours, that's what coaches want to put on like their roster for the portal, right? To keep everybody out of the portal for 72 hours. We can lock everybody down and get that roster retention. And so, yeah, man, I mentioned this to you before. I saw it in the store and I was like, no, got to get that promo code. Go to Mando, put the SEC promo code in and get it up there. So they're hooking us up.
Get it cheaper.
Yeah, hooking us up.
All right, so hook us up, Stephen, with a breakout player for them Ole Miss Rebels.
I think we might have the same guy. So I'll throw him out there. Let's go with the quarterback, Austin Simmons. He's the only one that I have on my list of breakout candidates for this year. Obviously, small sample size with the game against Georgia, but he was very impressive in that one drive. And it's not just that. It's the offense for Ole Miss, the track record, the weapons that they will have from the portal, the offensive scheme. So I just like the talent, plus the upside, plus the offense, plus the weapons. Give me Austin Simmons at Ole Miss.
Oh, nice. Different one. I agree. Everything you just said. I like Austin Simmons. I think he's gonna be phenomenal. They're saying he's a bigger, stronger Tua down there. So good night. If he's that good, Ole Miss may be marching its way to the college football playoff, but he's going to need some weapons around him, Stephen. And not that they're devoid of talent down there or anything, but they do love going into the portal, do they not? And again, I know I said I don't do portal guys, but I'm going back to the portal, Stephen. Give me Luke Haas, tight end from Arkansas. Lane Kiffin loves to utilize a tight end. And I know they've got one down there that's already very good, but they're losing Caden Prescore, and they got to replace him with somebody. I think Luke Haas, who's been banged up, that's going to be his biggest challenge, is staying healthy, staying on the field. Because 2 years ago, he looked like Arkansas's best player, at least on offense, as a true freshman. Going into year 3 in college football, he's very familiar with SEC defenses, playing in a more productive offense. Let's call it what it is. I think I think Luke Haas is the next Caden Prescore, who was a heck of a player for the Ole Miss Rebels.
That's a great call. Daquan Wright is back at tight end, and he had about 27 catches last year. So you add in Haas and Daquan Wright, and yes, they're missing Prescorn, who was a very valuable piece. They're still going to be very good at tight end. Those are 2 really solid players. I thought watching Luke Haas early on in his career at Arkansas, I thought he's going to be the next big time playmaker. Injuries, and I think some of the offensive transition have hurt him. I think there's a real chance to get back on track at Ole Miss. So I think that's a great call, Mike. I think there's a good chance that he's all SEC by the end of the year.
Yeah, and obviously Ole Miss loves to go tempo. In having these tight ends on the field, you can do so many things. You could be run heavy, you could be pass heavy. You can essentially do it all with the same personnel groupings. Well, let me ask you this, because it's something I've never even considered, Stephen. And I know that they get a little butthurt when we bring it up. My apologies to all the butthurt out there. But Ole Miss fell apart at the end, right? Well, not,
Yeah.
I mean, not fell apart, but lost games they shouldn't. And the SEC made a very, very much emphasis on faking injuries. We're going to stop the faking injuries. I think they did a decent job of that in the second half of the season. Is there a chance that hurt Ole Miss? Because they were not the only ones. Again, I joke when I say butthurt because many are doing it, but they were the chief culprits. I mean, anybody who watched one of their games is not an Ole Miss fan can pinpoint 10 fake injuries. You know what I mean? So the fact that they're kind of like they're legislating that out of football. I mean, how much does that hurt Ole Miss?
It hurts. I'm not sure what the percentage is to assign that. You know, on the other side of things is they were so like a couple mistakes away from, I mean, winning all 3 of those games, right? I mean, you know, certainly Kentucky, LSU was in overtime, and you know Jackson Dart's throwing a couple interceptions against Florida hurt their cause. So, you know, I think it mattered. I think the other things probably mattered more, if that makes sense. You know, just with like mistakes and clean up some of those things. Lane Kiffin's like 4th down play calling, decision making was kind of weird at times too. I don't know. That's a good question though. I mean, I guess this year might give us a little bit more data on it.
If they go 6-6, we're going to be like, it was the fake injuries,
It was
the whole thing. You know what?
Right? Yeah. That Georgia State opener suddenly looks a lot more.
How about how about Mizzou, Stephen? Where you want to go with the Tigers?
I'm going to go a little bit off the radar, and let's go back to an acquisition that they had last season that got hurt and didn't play a game, and that is Darius Smith from the transfer from Georgia. He's going to play off the edge this year. You know, top 15 edge player coming out of high school. Johnny Walker is departing, so they could use a little bit more pop from the pass rush. So I like Darius Smith, the Georgia transfer, to make an impact this year and deliver some kind of breakout season for Missouri.
I like that pick, Stephen. I think people are sleeping. I know their fans are certainly not, but I think the rest of the SEC sleeping on Missouri's defense. How about this returning production? I believe number 2. Yep, number 2 on the defensive side of the football. And they attacked heavily in the portal as well. So wrong Georgia transfer, though, Stephen. I say all that to say David Wilson, give me him. High profile, the highest rated transfer I think Missouri has ever got. 22 tackles, 3 sacks for Georgia. He was in line to start for the Dogs this year, but now he's starting. I don't think he's officially locked it up or anything, but he will likely start as an edge defender for the Missouri Tigers. Is that too bold to say Damon Wilson could be a breakout candidate for the Missouri Tigers?
Not at all, because I think if he is probably at Georgia, he's probably one of their top preseason pass rushers coming off the edge. Because that to me, that is one of the defensive things Georgia's got to sort out is who are those difference makers off the edge at linebacker. So I think Darius Smith, Wilson, somebody out of that duo is going to get to the quarterback pretty consistently. And if nothing else, I mean, guys that were that high profile coming out of high school, going over to play for Missouri and getting a chance to start. I mean, a defense that's got a lot of experience back. I think even guys like Zion Young, Chris McClellan could take a step forward this year. So there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about that defensive front. And even if you get like, you know, breakout seasons from either Wilson or Smith, you're talking about a very deep pass rush there from Missouri.
Yeah, remember when he hit the portal, the assumption was he's going to Ohio State. Ohio State was on him. Ohio State gets whoever the heck they want. Missouri stepped in and said, not so fast, my friend. So you simply cannot have enough pass rushers, and that's been paramount to Missouri's success over the years. They've sent a lot of those guys to the NFL. They need someone to step in. So the opportunity is there. Now we'll see if they get it. All right, how about Oklahoma, Stephen? Who's a breakout candidate for the Sooners?
I've got Eli Bowen at cornerback. So he started 8 straight games to end last season. Stat sheet impact, 1 interception, 4 pass breakups, 30 tackles, you know, not a huge impact. But I think if you look at his advanced metrics, he was targeted 39 times, gave up only 21 catches, and limited receivers to just 72 yards after the catch. So he did a nice job of not giving up a lot and then making sure it didn't translate into big plays as a freshman last year. So I think you can see where this is going. A corner who played right away, the lights weren't too bright. Year 2 under Brent Venables, I think he can step up and be one of the top corners in the SEC. So give me Eli Bowen for Oklahoma.
Ooh, yeah, I like that pick. I think the obvious, and again, we're not picking quarterbacks really, even though we each picked one. John Mateer is the obvious. He could be a household name. He could be awesome, score 40 touchdowns. You either love him or you hate him, apparently. It's why, isn't it wild, Stephen? I mean, Texas, I can't imagine any of those people even watch John Mateer or care about John Mateer. As soon as he's a Sooner, he sucks. He's awful. He can't do it. So again, John Mateer is the obvious one, but I'm not picking quarterbacks. How about this one? And this might be cheating a little bit. We saw him in limited duties, and I thought he lived up to the hype, and then he unfortunately got injured. They desperately need weapons to emerge if John Mateer is going to do anything. Give me Deion Burks. Well, again, that may seem like a no-brainer, but he only had 245 yards last year and 3 touchdowns, but that's largely due to injury. And I don't know what limited viewings we got of him last year, Stephen. I was very impressed. I thought he lived up to the hype. Again, very limited, but if he can be healthy, I think he could be potentially all SEC caliber.
I like that call because if you go back to the start of last season, he was considered one of the top receivers in the country, and certainly one of the top receivers available in the portal. In a injury-plagued season, I think now that he's healthy, more consistency at OC, maybe better quarterback, all of those things line up for Deion Burks to get back to that 2023 production that we saw back at Purdue that made him one of the top transfers in college football. So that to me is a very, very slam dunk pick as breakout player for Oklahoma.
All right. How about Tennessee, Stephen? A lot of candidates. That's good, but that's also bad. I mean, you lost a lot, but a very talented young roster for Josh Heupel and company. Who you got for Tennessee?
Curious to see what you think of this one, Mike. I'm going to go with Boo Carter.
Yeah.
Potentially another two-way player. We've seen some, a lot of talk about that since Travis Hunter played for Colorado. But I think the thing about Boo Carter and becoming a household name, maybe it's too easy. But if you're going to play some on offense, you're going to play some on defense, and you're going to play some on special teams, every week when you watch these games, he is going to be in the spotlight, and there's a chance that he makes a impact play, on one of those 3 sides of the ball at some point in some of these SEC games, which I think makes him a breakout candidate. So, started 5 games last season, 38 tackles. I think there's a lot of potential here now with the extra responsibilities. You don't want to put too much on him, but there's a lot of opportunities there as a 3-way player at Tennessee next year.
Yeah, that's a great pick, Stephen. And all indications this spring, Boo Carter has stepped up to be a leader for Tennessee. They desperately need some leaders to step up. And it's funny that you say Travis Hunter because he almost went to Colorado. Sure, they sold him on that vision to be the next one. He considered the portal, and I think Colorado was still selling that vision on him. So he's a Tennessee guy from the state, staying loyal. Well, as loyal as I'm sure they're paying him an insane amount. But again, he could be Tennessee's version of that, and I think he will. So I think he's probably the most logical candidate. I think it's a heck of a selection by you, Stephen. But I'm going to go a different receiver. I'm going Mike Matthews, who there for a minute looked like his time at Tennessee was over. And I lean on the great Rusty Manziel, who's been on this show. It covers the state of Georgia like no one else. Says this guy's a complete freak show at receiver. Now, I don't know why. He only had 90 receiving yards last year, but he did have 2 touchdowns. He was not given the opportunities as a true freshman. Heupel, not a fan of freshmen, apparently. He's a fan of sophomores. He better be, because otherwise Mike Matthews, this could be it for him. But they desperately need some receivers to step up. Give me Mike Matthews. I think he could be. I don't know how good he's going to be, because heck, like I said, he didn't even have 100 yards yet in college football. But they need someone there, and maybe it's Chris Brazzell, who transferred in last year and was solid, but not spectacular. I like a lot of these transfers in their second year, but I think Mike Matthews is far more talented than any receiver they have on that roster. And if they don't have someone step up in a big way, Tennessee's going to be in trouble this fall.
I like the odds of a transfer in their second year taking off. You know, that you now have a full season of learning, spending a full spring, off-season workout, summer, and getting acclimated to the program. So I think you could see Chris Brazzell take a step forward. But also, I think if you just look at the sheer math of this, like Dante Thornton, Brew McCoy, and Squirrel White are all gone. Somebody's got to catch passes at Tennessee, which brings me to Matthews. Talent plus opportunity. If you have that much talent, the opportunity is there. It's your second year on campus. It seems like everything is lined up for him to have that breakout year. So he is very high on my list as well, Mike. I think Mike Matthews is a good call.
And then A&M, Steven. So I'm going to leave this screen up again. Receiving yards, returning. Same reason. You pinpoint Tennessee, only 31% of their receiving, returning. Well, A&M's even worse, Steven. 26%. Their top 5 receivers from last year are all off the roster. So I'm going with the last man standing. Come on, Terry Bussey, Steven. I think Terry Bussey, that's my candidate. He was number 6 in receiving for A&M last year as a true freshman, a very touted guy, but they were kind of playing him all over. Running back, receiver. Mike Elko has said this spring, we're leaving him at receiver. We did him a disservice last year, asking him to fill in all these roles. He's got to master one before he can move around. Terry Bussey, extremely talented. They went into the portal. They got Kevin Concepcion. They got some other guys. So it's not going to be just the Bussey show by any means, but I just think year 2, another year with Marcel Reed, another year in the Colin Klein system. I think Terry Bussey is a name not a lot of people around the SEC know today. I think they will by the end of the season.
To go, we talked about this kind of with Boo Carter and, the versatility, but at the same time, I think with Terry Bussey, it's almost like removing some of those things is a good thing for him. Like being able to just concentrate at receiver and not being moved around to all these different places, because there's a real opportunity with what A&M loses. I mean, with Noah Thomas and Barber Walker and tight end Trey Watson gone, somebody's got to catch passes here. And it certainly hurts that Micah Hudson's not going to end up coming to Texas A&M. Which brings me to my candidate, and I'm going to take, and I hate to take a transfer, I'm going to take Kevin Concepcion. I love the versatility that he had at NC State. And NC State's quarterback situation and offense the last 2 years has been a little bit up and down. But he brings you the ability to be a weapon in the passing game. He's a weapon in the running game, and he's also a weapon on special teams. So it's almost like you have to find ways to get him 10 to 15 touches. Maybe that's a rush out of the slot. That's a kick return. That's some short passes where he can break a tackle and make a play. This is it with Bussey and Concepcion. There are 2 guys, and throw Mario Craver in there as well. If you want to evaluate Marcel Reed, you got to give him better weapons. And I think these 3 players have a really, really good chance to take their game to another level, which helps Marcel Reed's development as well.
They're having fun in the comments. Stephen talking about Nick Saban. That someone said they bought a car from him, and then Green Wave said, "Well, I stayed at his VRBO one." Shout out Green Wave for the amazing comment. All right, how about where you go with Vanderbilt? I had a heck of a time, Stephen, with Vanderbilt. They returned so much, and heck, I consider a lot of these guys stars already. Diego and Stowers and all these. Who's a breakout candidate in your mind for the Commodores?
I've got a pick that might be a little bit under the radar, but I thought he made a massive impact last year, and that is Randon Fontenette at safety. 728 snaps. That was the most of any Vanderbilt defender. He played that many last year. But also what caught my attention was he lined up everywhere. He was in the box, he was playing safety, he could play the slot, he could play the corner, he could play the edge. His versatility, and there's sort of like this nerdy football thing where there's like this positionless football where, you have guys who can play a lot of different roles and, allows you to do a lot of different things schematically. Well, he was it last year. 73 tackles, 8 tackles for a loss, couple sacks, 8 pass breakups, and an interception. The interception was the touchdown returned against Alabama. So I love the stat sheet stuffing, the versatility, and the impact in the biggest upset for Vanderbilt last year.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. I get a smile to my face every time I think about it, Steven. So that's a heck of a call. I knew you were going to go there, so I considered it, but I was like, I'm leaving him off my list because that's Steven's guy. He shouted him out many times on the show, so I'm gonna let him give him every opportunity to do so. How about this? I took a wild card here, Steve, because we need help at receiver. I'm going Pruitt Hudson, Mississippi State transfer. Barely played at State last year under Jeff Lebby. But why am I picking? So why the heck am I picking this guy? Well, he played at New Mexico State with Diego Pavia in the kill squad. He had 10 touchdowns, Stephen, 2 years ago, 571 yards. So he knows the system. He's familiar with Diego Pavia and company. I'm hoping that Trent Hudson is like a missing piece there to help that offense. And I don't know if you got the Jerry Kill, Tim Beck seal of approval, you got my seal of approval.
I love that pick because it does feel like Vanderbilt needs a third receiver, because if you think Stowers and Junior Sherrill are locked into like your 1 and 2, and Hudson already has that connection with Diego Pavia and a big playability, which I think they need a little bit more speed at receiver to stretch the field. I think that makes a ton of sense. So getting the gang back together on West End is a good call there, Mike.
All right, last one here, Stephen. I've decided until they get serious about football, I'm going to do Mississippi State last forever, or until they, do not embarrass us on a weekly basis here. Who are you going for Mississippi State?
I'm afraid that my pick might be a little bit too obvious, but he's a guy that I've enjoyed watching at Mississippi State last year, and that is Isaac Smith at safety. Mississippi State fans know how good he is. I mean, he was second team All SEC by the coaches, but 127 tackles. Some of that is Mississippi State's defense is pretty bad, and you're probably making a lot of tackles after the line of scrimmage didn't hold up well. But I think he was a really good player on a bad defense. And I think if the defense around him improves with all the portal additions this year, there's a chance that he goes to maybe first team All SEC and is regarded as one of the better defensive backs in the conference. So there's not a ton of obvious candidates here for Mississippi State. There's a lot of unknowns, and he just feels like he's maybe a little bit too obvious, but I think he deserves a little bit more recognition than he's getting.
Yeah, I think you said it well there, Stephen. I struggled with Mississippi State for a lot. The reason you just said, a lot of unknowns. They're another one where, heck, even the guys that did perform, Stephen, hit the portal. So we know they love to pass the ball. Only 36% of the receiving production is back for Hail State. So again, this is a complete swing here. I could be totally wrong. How about this, Stephen? I love a little Egg Bowl drama. And I kept hearing about this guy down in Oxford, Aiden Williams, fantastic. He's going to be our next great Ole Miss receiver. Didn't quite work out for him, but what happened? He entered the portal, and now he's Mississippi State receiver. So they need help desperately. He was one of the most talented players out of the state of Mississippi in the last couple of years. And it seems like Jeff Lebby, there's criticisms there to be sure, but you can insert players and they can go gangbusters in his system. So again, this is a complete swing, but they need receivers. They got a talented one that for whatever reason didn't work out at Ole Miss. Maybe it'll work out Mississippi State. Aiden Williams, that's my breakout player.
Mike, I think that makes a ton of sense because it's kind of gets at something that we've talked about, which is opportunity plus talent, equals production. And if you're someone like Aiden Williams, you've been on another SEC school, you transfer to another one, you're hungry to get on the field, and Mississippi State's going to throw a bazillion passes this year.
Right.
The opportunity, talent, potential, it's all there. I love the call of Aiden Williams. I was almost jokingly going to say two of the things that I wrote down on my sheet here were insert any receiver that wins the starting job. But also, I think Mississippi State's running backs aren't bad. I like, Davin Booth and of course, Johnny Daniels played a little bit last year and production was there with over 500 yards. I like Fluff Bothwell, though. Great name, all name teamer coming over from South Alabama. And I kind of scratched my head watching him last time thinking, I don't know how this guy went under the radar in recruiting, but it feels like he could play at a higher level. So I don't know that he can unseat anybody. And given the likelihood of the scoreboard, the production might be there, but maybe a few big plays, maybe a little bit more pop out of the running game. I could see him playing his way into that because he was really productive at South Alabama last year.
Yeah. All right. Well, Stephen, we went about 90 minutes here on some SEC football on the final day of March here. Any closing thoughts before you wrap this one up?
Mike, I am hungry for any spring practice tidbit. I wish we had some more competitive spring games to be able to evaluate, watch some of these teams. But hey, I'll take what we can get, and looking forward to seeing what happens with those SEC teams at the Final Four next Saturday.
Will we even have any? I think A&M, I think South Carolina. Are there any other televised SEC spring games?
I don't think so. I think that's probably it this year. A lot of teams are now doing what they say, like the spring showcase, which
right.
That's not really a game. But
I'm looking it up here. So this weekend we got. Oh yes, I mean Tech. I'm looking at the schedule, but yeah, 90% of these. No, I mean Oklahoma apparently will be SEC Network Plus, but they're not doing a game. That's the first one I'm seeing here. A&M in about 2 weeks. Colorado's doing. If Colorado can have a spring, that's man. This burns me up, Stephen. This used to be a highlight. My highlight of the spring is getting to watch all these spring games, and now they're gone. You know what?
It was a highlight of the spring for sure because it's kind of like a good appetizer in between last season and this season, and so it gave us a little bit of a chance to see some of these teams for the first time, even if you knew that it was just a game scripted to get high scoring, a game that wasn't meant to, for ones to play ones. It was just to give us a little bit of something to watch during that long delay. So yeah, man, if Dion and Colorado can stir it up to maybe do a spring game, which I'm not going to be able to do this year, but maybe next year, seems like some of these SEC teams can't let the Big 12 outmaneuver them in the spring game department.
All right, Stephen. Well, hey, before you go, as always, can you remind the cousins how to follow you and how to find your work?
Absolutely. Yeah. Athlonsports.com is where you can read all my work. Got a lot of preseason spring stuff up there right now at Athlon Steven on Twitter and Stephen L. CFB over on Facebook and Instagram.
All right, Stephen, thank you so much for dropping all this outstanding knowledge on us. We appreciate each and every one of you for hanging out. We'll be back with Cousin Shane tomorrow. Until then, we'll catch you on the next one.
Hey, buddy, this beer's for you, Mike, and Cousin Shane. That SEC podcast loves the Pirate, and the Pirate loves that SEC podcast. Hail State.